Working within the healthcare sector has meant that I have seen so many different opportunities for working within complexity and ambiguity. And it hasn't necessarily been an easy time, especially during the fact that COVID has happened, we've had a pandemic, and the government has been, I guess, sort of like trying to work it out in terms of what the best possible solution is. We can go down the route of if, buts, and maybes. However, I want to talk to you guys about how I've been able to manage complexity and ambiguity during times like this. Now, again, I've been working within the NHS for the past 11, 12 years, or should I say the healthcare sector. And as some of you might already know, I'm an independent consultant / contractor. And so there are some things that I've picked up. I've been in situations where, again, working on COVID-19, where we've had to really have the right sort of response and reactiveness in order to cater towards individuals who are being affected by the disease. I've been in situations where I've had to work on some really complex, technical, digital, and sort of like public health related programs, work streams, and projects. Again, with little budget and various different cultures and different types of people. There are things that I've picked up along the way. And so the first thing I want to talk about is acceptance. When I completed my coach practitioner training, we were taught this whole sort of like idea of that if you are leading, if you're in a space of complexity and ambiguity, there needs to be a certain level of acceptance. Accepting that this is how it is and not trying to be in denial, because that denial is creating energy and some sort of frustration and tension to the fact that actually times are difficult and challenging. But if there's a level of acceptance, again, this is something that, the psychologists and different professionals talk about with emotional agility, then you get into a space of really getting to a point of, okay, this is what it is. How do I now want to act? What's the next plan? Like, what do I need to be doing? And so acceptance just puts you in a different mindset in order for you to move forward. So that's the first thing. If you find it hard to accept things, you need to brutally look at the situation and understand what is it that you're not wanting to accept. Sometimes we have to do that. What are we not wanting to accept? And then we go from there, because we can work backwards and understand, okay, what is the root for my tension or frustration? And how can I overcome it in order to focus on what can be controlled or at least influenced? So the second thing is just that. Understand what your locus of control is. I mean, we're always grounded by this fact that there are certain things that we can change, we can influence, we can sort of like, have an approach on. And so if you either research this, if you try to speak to your line manager, if you have a line manager, because there are situations where people don't have a direct line manager, are there other people you can speak to? What are the things you can do to really understand what you can control? And sometimes it just comes down to brainstorming a logic. What are your anticipated roles and responsibilities? Has that even been written down? Is there anything else that you can sort of mirror or look at in order to understand what it is that you can control or at least manage and influence? Because again, can't control everything, but we can do things to direct things towards a specific direction. So that's your next step. Be clear about your roles and responsibilities and your accountability so you know exactly what you can control, manage, or influence. The third thing I'd like to say is that you need to gather the right sort of intel. And how do you do this? Well, it's from a number of different sources. One way you could do it is through actually meeting up with different internal stakeholders. So these are people within your team, people on sort of like side teams, people on vertical teams, whatever it may be. Just meet with people who you feel or have been told should be working with you on a specific project or operations or business as usual. So you can get some insights. And what you're trying to get here is, number one, what the feel of the culture is. Number two, where they're at. Number three, what their roles and responsibilities are. Number four, how does that work in context to you? And number five, where you can go from there. Okay. So gathering that intel is crucial. The next thing from that is to get information from the organization. So sometimes the organization does organization-wide events or sessions or meetings. And so this is an opportunity to understand how things should look like or could look like or may look like. And of course, this is your opportunity to ask questions to people who are presenting in order for you to get into a space of clarity and, again, certainty as well. The final thing I'll say is, when you are meeting up with people in your rhythmic meetings, in your cadence, you need to get really good at writing notes. Now, it depends on what type of person you are. Some people may write notes in a physical book, but I prefer to write notes on Word. Okay, so Word Online if I'm using OneDrive or SharePoint, or, on the desktop. And what this does is that every time I write something, then I can organize this into folders so I can easily retrieve that information and go over it so I can refresh my memory. And so that's what I definitely do, at least in my first 30, 60, and 90 days. But you want to keep up that habit anyway. So gather your intel. The fourth thing you want to do is determine the gap analysis. What do I mean by this? Well, you want to get into a phase or state where you understand what good looks like. This is why you're gathering the information. You want to understand what the future state is supposed to look like or should feel like. You can get this from the vision, mission statement, the intel that you gathered, your sort of logical deductions as well. But also look at what the current state is. And this is why you gathered the intel, because from that gap, you can develop some sort of working plan in order for you to be in a space of understanding what are your next steps. And that plan can look as simple as an action log. It can look like a Kanban board. It can look like a document. It doesn't really matter as long as it's legible and it has the key things within a plan. So again, with the plan, you need the task, you need the timescales, you need who's accountable, you need what sort of outcome or result you're looking for, any sort of commentary, etc., etc. So these things are key when you're developing that gap analysis, but then in order to develop that plan as well. Before we continue, I would love to know what key things or quality or aspects do you think are required in order for you to manage complexity and ambiguity? I'd love to know your thoughts. Please leave them in the comment section below. So I've spoken about gap analysis. I've spoken about planning. And again, it can be as simple as an action log. But the next thing I think you need to be focusing on is developing a rhythm. Okay. So this is essentially making sure that you have the right sort of events, meetings, activities scheduled in your calendar, in your diary. Okay. So this is important because what these different events and meetings do is, number one, it helps with defining governance. It helps with quality assurance. It helps with feedback. It helps you understand what it is that you need to be doing. It helps you develop some sort of implementation or working group. It helps you improve or work on any documentation that you need to produce. And it also helps you with a certain level of accountability as well. Really, really important stuff. And so that cadence, again, is a way to measure how effective, but also review what you're doing, especially amongst other people as well. And so with those different meetings, you may need a terms of reference. You may need somebody who can write minutes. That may be you as the individual. You need something to record this information and keep it organized. Okay. So there's some sort of agenda as well. So think about these key things. And of course, some people may be like, this is basic, but if you're working in ambiguity and complexity, it is difficult. Okay. Sometimes the classic MSP doesn't work. Sometimes the classic agile doesn't work, but you need elements of those different things as well. Okay. So hopefully this has given you some food for thought. The next thing I'll say is to get a buddy. What do I mean by this? It doesn't need to be a formal corporate buddy, but it needs to be someone that you can actually liaise with, talk with, express your emotions and your concerns, understand if they're feeling the same way. Listen, if you're in an environment that is ambiguous and complex, it's most likely going to be high pressured as well. You probably don't have the right level of leadership, and this is nothing necessarily against the individuals, but because the structure isn't necessarily there. And so you need to get that sense of being sane. And so having someone you can talk to, whether this is a formal or informal buddy or someone you just chat with on a regular basis, will allow you to understand that you're not going crazy, because you're not. And so just have that person on a more informal basis. You may share things about your personal life if you're comfortable. Obviously, you're going to talk about professional things too, but have that person you can at least rely on in some sort of work capacity so you can really lay off and share and express yourself and understand that you're not going crazy too, because burnout is real. And if you don't have those basic things in place, it's going to be difficult for you to function. The next thing I'll say is to embed some sort of structure. Okay. So there may not be a PMO. There may not be a set level of standardization. Maybe you're that person. If not for other people, do it for yourself. Okay. Really important stuff. So this comes down to folders. This comes down to naming conventions of files. This comes down to how you work and what you operate on. Are you using SharePoint? Are you keeping everything on your desktop? This comes down to how you communicate, so your emails and your categorization, or how you message people on Teams. Whatever it is, have some way of working. Use some sort of methodology. Maybe you've got some training within the change management space or the MSP space or the agile space. Adopt some of that methodology. Have some of that templates, or use some of those templates, or create those templates. Maybe there are organization-wide templates that you can use. Maybe there are documents or policies that you can refer to. What I'm saying is create that familiarity and that standardization across the board, because that is going to be really useful for you in terms of making sure that you understand how to move, especially in complex and ambiguous situations. The next thing is to have time to breathe. Okay, you need space and time to breathe, because you can't be go, go, go all the time. If there are meetings you don't necessarily need to go to, don't go to them. Okay, schedule time for lunch in your diary, whether it's half an hour or an hour. Go for a walk. Make sure that you don't pass the time that you're supposed to finish. And some people may be like, is that possible? Well, if you're working from home and you're a knowledge worker, it is possible, but it's difficult. I'm guilty of doing that myself. And so you have to give yourself a rough time. So let's say, for example, if you're doing 8:30 to 4:30 as an example, are you giving yourself a rule that you won't work past an hour plus or 2 hours plus your actual finishing time? And are you okay with not being remunerated for it, or are you going to remunerate for it? You have to really understand what your boundaries look like, because those boundaries are key. Especially when you start something, be clear about what you need to do. For those people who are entrepreneurs, or for those people who are trying to do something outside of work, you really need those boundaries. For those people who have kids or who have caring responsibilities, you really need those boundaries. For those people who have habits and sort of hobbies that they want to really pursue, you need to really make sure that you have those boundaries. And if you don't have that stuff, then I can understand why you may feel like you need to work. And so boundaries are key, especially in a space like this. The next thing I'll have to say is to review what's happening. Okay, don't leave things for granted. You need time to really reflect upon what's happening. So this may be with your buddy. This may be with your line manager. This may be with team colleagues. This may be yourself. Okay. Review can happen on a daily basis if you're checking out your action log in your plan, but it can also happen when you have consolidated time to think about the approach, the style, the plan, what's actually happening, any updates and progress in context to what someone else is doing that affects your work, or vice versa. So hopefully this has given you some food for thought, because it's really important that in ambiguous situations you lead. And leadership is really important in making sure that you're effective in your role modeling and how you influence different people. So if you're interested in making sure that you develop yourself as a leader, click on the link below if you're looking for coaching sessions, or if you'd like to be on a waiting list for a membership program that I'm looking to release, hopefully next year. But again, I'll give you more details on that. If you like videos like this, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. And as always, my friends, understand, reach, and expand. Peace.